first as a listener, and then when you're trying to translate that experience into a written scroll. Robert Alter, when he talks about the difference that these punctuation marks make, he says that like the style of the passage is more than just like an embellishment of a message, but it's like a vital medium through which ideas are communicated. So it's like not something that you can just take it or leave it. It's like, this is how the Bible might be communicating something about this event.
Yeah, I mean, I want to ask how that problem can potentially be avoided. If there would be a way in translation, I mean, presumably kind of not, given that everybody does include sort of normal English punctuation, but I wonder if there would be a way in translation to convey the same feeling of the sort of continual idea that still makes grammatical sense. I mean, you could maybe sort of try to use commas instead or something, or maybe write it as verse and have no full stops or punctuation, but like a line break.
That comes up in music notation a lot, because you've got like someone delivering, here's the notes you have to manufacture to recreate this melody, but like any musician knows that's not really the message. The message is like in the crescendos and the... You're more of a musician than I, so you probably know more of those terms.
Well, have you ever read the lyrics to a song that you've never heard before? It's oftentimes just an incredibly cringe-making experience. It's a bit of a sort of known fact, I think, among artists. I may be wrong about this. That you think that poets would be good at writing lyrics and good lyricists would be good at writing poetry, but they're actually not as translatable as you might think. If you try to take a poem and set it to music, it's actually incredibly difficult to do. I have a friend who worked with a very esteemed poet, and the idea was, it was sort of a musician friend and the esteemed poet, and they were going to come together and create a song, and I think it kind of didn't work in the end, because it turns out that good poets don't make good lyrics, and it's because if you read these lyrics, it's just like really weird. If you can't hear the tune and the phrasing, it's a bit sort of clunky, or it sounds a bit bad. And I'm thinking here, maybe like reading the Bible in translation is a bit like reading the lyrics to a song without knowing what the music is, without knowing what the phrasing is supposed to be, and it just makes it sound a bit more clunky and almost like have a different message.
I think with the Quran, they definitely take that approach.
Absolutely.
So every verse is going to have a set melody that maybe you can improvise or add little flourishes, but then I think they would believe that musicality is just as sacred to the meaning of the text as the shape of the letters.
Yeah, well, that's why, I mean, I have found Qurans that are just written in English, but you almost always find Qurans with the English printed next to the Arabic, because there's this sort of overt recognition that, okay, we're going to translate this into English, but you have to recognize that this is a compromise because the language of the recitation is Arabic, and there's something in the phrasing, in the pronunciation, in the way that it's so melodic, that is part of, not only part of the message itself, but also part of the very proof of its divinity. There's a sort of test in the Quran to produce something so well put together, so genius, so beautiful, so perfect, which is something that just can't be captured in a translation. And I think actually people just tend to forget this more when they're reading the Bible. They forget just how much a translation can completely alter our interpretation of the words. We're talking here about full stops. It seems maybe a little more trivial than some other examples. I mean, there are so many translation differences which are absolutely huge. I'm thinking of like Paul in the New Testament writing about women. The meaning of this text is falling apart to me, and makes me want to go and study Hebrew, to be honest, because I just can't get a grasp of what any of it means. You've spoken before about the sort of the tone of the Bible. The like you say, you know, without form and void sounds very formal and very serious. It's like a stern father telling you a story, right? But like, I think so much of essentially the undertones of scripture can be lost in translation.
It's very malleable depending on what assumption you have about what it's supposed to be sounding like. And
we have to sort of adapt it to English.
And I think it's especially powerful in the first verse of the Bible when it actually has a narrative difference.
That's what happens with language when you pick a word which is supposed to have a lot of significance and meaning, but the more it gets used, especially if it's used as commonly as sort of before any object, it just starts to lose its meaning.
Robert Alter, he has a copy of the Hebrew Bible that took him like 30 years to do, and he's got a really great commentary on it. So it's like when he can't replicate a literary effect that he knows that's in there, he'll go into it in length in the commentary. And that was one of my best purchases, to feel like I'm reading this text through someone who's sensitive to these features and then knows enough to know what cannot possibly be translated into English. And so that's been a great resource. But I think every translation, every way you try to render this verse is going to leave something out. It's going to be misunderstood by modern culture, because how could it not? It's such a different audience coming from a wildly different world, that I think more than trying to find a perfect rendering of Genesis 1:1, I think the approach, making sure you're approaching each Bible verse you read with an understanding that there's probably a lot of layers to it that have been completely lost or distorted, and that you're getting like the tip of the iceberg that's been filtered through 1, 2, or 3 cultures. I think it's probably more important to go into a Bible first with that awareness than trying to find the definitive rendering of a passage.
Yeah,